journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And strange as it may seem, my first step in a journey down the River Shannon begins with a visit to the Brigidine sisters at Sulisfrida in County Kildare.
Anna, we give you the light of Bridget, a flame of justice and peace to accompany you as you set out on your pilgrim journey down the Shannon. May this flame shine a light on the increasing pollution of the river and on the urgent need to care for and to protect this majestic river for future generations.
The Shannon, first mapped in the 2nd century AD by the Roman geographer Ptolemy, is named after Shona, a Celtic goddess, and it's the longest river in Ireland, flowing through or between no fewer than 11 counties, draining a fifth of the country's land. The Shannon Pot is a small pool on the slopes of the Quilca Mountains in County Cavan, and it's said to be the starting point for the river. From here, it winds its way in a southwesterly direction through the village of Dowra, before reaching the head of Loch Allen, the first of the 3 Great Lakes on the river. And it's here I begin my journey down the river to the estuary, carrying the pure drop of water taken from its source and the flame of St. Bridget. I'm hoping to meet with people at the different stages of my journey to discuss with them the importance of protecting the river for future generations.
Creative Ireland is a relatively new programme. It's the government recognising how important our cultural well-being is and how inspired people are by the environment that they live in and how important it is to protect that, but also to make some of our cultural assets more accessible to people.
Our planet is under threat. A recent UN report told us if we don't take action in the next 12 years, we're facing catastrophic consequences. So I think we need to do everything possible to alert people to the urgency of the situation that we live in and the need for urgent action now. And there's nothing more important for ourselves, for our planet, for our children, than to preserve the integrity and the beauty of this extraordinary jewel of the universe.
I'm at the granny age, if you like. And if we don't do something now, children who could be my grandchildren will have nothing left for them. We're polluting the environment. Well, one of the big problems I see in Ireland and elsewhere is degradation of the soil, degradation of the water, generally speaking, degradation of the earth.
It is our job, each of us, not just Waterways Ireland or the local authorities or Irish Water or the ESB or the OPW, who all have an interest in this water body, but it is up to every individual and every community to ensure that they pass this wonderful landscape on to the next generation in as good, if not a better condition.
We have to get back again thinking quite differently about how we farm. We need to be thinking about the type of flora and fauna, the type of animals we keep, how we manage runoff from our land, and how we better control water flows, because we are getting more intense rainfall patterns.
The increase in population in Ireland is putting stress on all our resources, not just the Shannon. There's been a massive population explosion in the Greater Dublin area, and we have all heard about the demands for water and that the Dublin local authorities are not going to be able to meet those demands. Now they're proposing they're going to build this vastly expensive pipeline from Partine down at Limerick and pipe the water the whole way to Dublin. We're really concerned in this area that is going to have a huge adverse impact on the Shannon from the top to the bottom and all the communities that are fed by the Shannon. The Shannon courses through 2/3 of our country. Most users of the Shannon have two aspects in mind. The Shannon is either for an activity such as kayaking or swimming or fishing or boating, or for tranquility, to get away from the stress of everyday life, and they're hugely important for public health, for people's mental and physical well-being. The river is a massively important part of that.
Drinking water, which is such an essential part of our lives, we do need to make sure that we think about the needs of everybody. And it's very clear when we're talking about the Shannon here that there are so many different needs and they're all very valid and they're very important. and it's important that they're all taken into account on decision making, because when we leave out some important criteria when we're making decisions, these impacts come back later on in some other way, and it's important that everybody's involved, that they're heard in the decision making process, because all of these activities that people are doing, and the essential and recreational and so on, they're all very much part of our essential lives. And when people are suffering as a result of inadequate decision making or poor decision making, those effects are very serious for the health of the public.
As an angler, we're in a unique situation because of the very creature that is at the heart of our sport, and that's fish. Because what a fish is really is the litmus paper of any water system, and when they get affected, we're in trouble. We see the tragic circumstances in other smaller rivers of fish kills. Well, at that stage it's too late. Now, we noticed that our fish stocks were plummeting, and we have proof that the nutrients going into the Shannon are very, very high. We're lucky in another sense that the Shannon has such a dilution factor, that the sheer volume of water in it prevented fish kills. The natural flood that comes flushes out the system. But in the late 70s, 80s and into the 90s, the Shannon was really a dumping ground. Everything went into it, raw sewerage. We built dumps on the side of it, on floodplains. Nutrients from the farmland, intensive farming was coming into it. But thankfully, I think we have turned a corner. But we, the anglers, knew about this all along. And we very, very nearly lost our Shannon.
Today, Waterways Ireland seals those tanks, and those tanks are pumped out on return every Saturday. So there is no sewage emitting from or being discharged into the water system.
That's absolutely brilliant.
Very recently in the news there was a statement from the World Wildlife Fund that since the 1970s the wildlife globally had diminished by 60%. Thinking about, well, what future will my child have and what is the River Shannon going to be like for them? It is scary to think about. What if there's no fish in the Shannon? Will that be there in 20 years? This is a river of international significance. It needs to be protected and restored where possible. And I'm hopeful that in the future it's there for my generation when I'm older and for the next generation to come to enjoy.
The history of even Hare Island, when there was a pig or a lamb or whatever was killed, the other islanders had known to come and get a piece of the thing that evening because there was smoke let off in one island. Everyone knew that was the place to go. Then coming into town on a Friday, the woman would sit at the top of the boat and the man would row into town. But going back up the river that night, she'd be rowing and he'd be sitting at the back of the boat. There's a few jars in him.
It's a whole culture. If you look at the history, the monuments, it's like a museum on the Shannon. St. Kieran of Clonmacnoise fame, he started here on Hare Island up near Cousin Point there, just before he went downstream to find Clonmacnoise. St. Brendan, the navigator, he was down at Longford. So there's a whole series of monastic settlements all over Lough Ree in particular. There's evidence of Vikings coming up here. Just on Hare Island alone, there was always reputed to be the largest Viking hoard of gold found. You had a Viking town developed up on the west bank up at Rendoon. So there's all sorts of historical things that should be really protected as well, or not kept in mind and kept to the forefront. Even ourselves, just to go and walk around them.
Exactly.
You don't have to be boating on the Shannon.
The cross of the scriptures at Clonmacnoise, that was carved about the year 900. There are 3 saints depicted on it. Only one of them is Irish, and that is St. Kieran. The other 2 are Egyptian. The movement of the Desert Fathers just before the collapse of the Roman Empire, when Constantine made Christianity legal, in other words, when the persecution stopped. But just before that time, people went off to the deserts of Egypt to practice their Christianity, their religion, and that form made its way through France, through to Ireland, this monastic type of Christianity. On Ptolemy's map of Ireland, which he made about 150 AD, it even comes inland and shows Ishnock. He just didn't sort of sail around the coast. And that's where the High Kings lived before they went to Tara. So the Egyptians knew their way around Ireland.
In the whole psychotherapy field, it really is about when we lose connection with ourselves, then we're in trouble in some way, we're struggling. And the work is bringing people back into connection with self. It's about taking those pauses to what do I see around me, what do I hear, what do I smell, what do I taste? And sure, it's all nature-based. It's the soothing, it's the holding, it's the carrying of the water, I'm sure. I'm going back to the indigenous people again and the responsibility that are on the elders. So I suppose sometimes I look and I say, what have we done? And look at what was given to us and what have we done?
People do need to have places where they can detach.
Yeah.
While some people mightn't be interested in the historical aspect of it, they don't realise they're actually using that, and they're taking it for granted. But come a sunny day, that's where we go. I do think it's been utilised, but in terms of whether people are aware of the importance of looking after it, I'm not sure.
The Shannon itself was a sacred place in prehistory. The name itself comes from the name of a water goddess, which was Shannon. Ancient people here, they made their offerings to their gods in the river, travelled along the river, they had their settlement along the river, and indeed the civilization of Ireland grew up along its waterways and of course along the coast, because Ireland being an island, the way that people came to the country was first of all by the sea, coming up from the Mediterranean and along the Atlantic coast, and then ultimately from the coastal areas of Ireland into the heartland, remembering now that the country was covered with forests and there was no effective way of getting about except through the rivers. So it was along the rivers that civilization really started in Ireland. And then you had the trading, later on you had the monks and the scholars and so on, all centred around the river. And then of course it goes right through the core of Ireland. So in a sense the River Shannon in particular, is really the heart of Ireland.
We live in an area called Eskeaton. There's an alumina refinery down there, but the problem is their waste is left at the Shannon Estuary. And it's toxic waste, Anna. That's our problem. And there's about 50 million tonnes of it in open ponds, and it blows. It leaks into the Shannon because the planning originally allowed for 70 acres of it that was never lined. So since 1983, it's been leaking into the Shannon. People who fly in from America can look down on a fine day and see all this red underneath the water. And no one seems to care. You're here today saying, how do we protect the Shannon? Well, I can say we've lost our chance in protecting the Shannon because the damage has been done from this toxic waste being left there.
One of the biggest environmental threats in Europe is happening in our area right now, and that's Shannon LNG, a terminal for imported American fracked gas. It would be built in Tarbert on the Kerry side. Ireland has banned fracking, but the plan at the moment is to bring in enormous amounts of this American fracked gas, which has the most ferocious emissions of any of the fossil fuels, actually. It used to be seen as a clean transition fuel, but it isn't anymore. It leaks methane at every opportunity, and this stuff is 86 times more destructive than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period.
The River Shannon is the jewel in the crown in Ireland. It tips off of 16 counties from Dingle to Fermanagh. And what happens to River Shannon will have an impact on the future generations in our country. The system and the Shannon have been failed by politicians, bureaucrats and multinationals. They seem to buy their way into dirty industry, and the essence of their results is pollution of the River Shannon. We have two areas of Limerick where we actually do not have habitable fish. An area in Goggins and there's an area in Castlemungreth. The big problem for us is the fauna and the marine life. And with the dirty industries, and they're going on now 6 decades in our region, and there's no one standing up for the river, there's no one standing up for the people until of late. And we now see the opportunity for 4 or 5 different groups in the Limerick Clare region to come together and stand as a unit to take on the politicians and the planners.
What we have to do essentially is draw our own strengths together in order to oppose that. It's extremely difficult to do that because politics now is so welded to business interest in the name of job security that very few people are prepared to really stick their neck out and oppose issues that in any way challenge the lifestyles that they've become accustomed to. It's only the people who essentially can see the bigger picture, can read immense damage this is going to do to both the health of people and to the environment in the years to come. Those are the people who are making a stand. The more people who make that stand, the better.
standing at the estuary with Angus in the background. It's visually very powerful. One of the things that inspired me on my journey was your environmental activism for the last 20 years, the work that you have done to protect the environment. So I just like to gift you with these two.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been fighting this for 20 years with minimum success, but hopefully with the help of St. Bridget and everything,
We'll get another 20 years. And let's hope the next 20 years will be better.
We don't do this for our family, we do it for all families.
Yes.
And for future generations, your family, my family, everyone's family.
It's the environment. We all breathe the air, and all we're looking for is clean air to breathe and clean water.
And thank you, Anna, for this.
You're more than welcome. So, my journey along the Shannon, from the Shannon Pot to the Shannon Estuary, has ended here with Angus Illumina in the background. And it has been a wonderful, magical journey where I've spoken to many people along the way. And my prayer at the journey end is that for the first time ever, Irish people will really waken up to the fact that we need to protect our environment for future generations. May our air, our water and our land be blessed by the flame of St. Bridget.